gives rides. He stays quiet. But years ago, he walked through gunfire to save lives across the world. And now, he just wants peace. But when a ghost from the past steps into his cab, the road he left behind comes calling again. Before we get into this powerful, cinematic story of courage, purpose, and the roads we choose to ride, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you know, and it keeps stories like this coming your way. And for those of you who've already liked and subscribed, may goodness chase you in every corner of your life. May you be blessed with good health, ease in all matters, and freedom from financial stress. May every worry find its answer. May healing reach you if you're sick, comfort surround you if you're grieving, and may peace live in your home, your heart, and your future. May the road ahead of you be clear, and the strength within you rise up to meet it. When you finish watching, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. What part of MJ's journey moved you the most? Let's talk about it. Now lean in, take a deep breath, and let's ride. The sun crept over the Boston skyline, slipping golden light between buildings that had stood for centuries. The air was crisp, the kind of chill that hinted spring might finally be arriving after months of gray. The narrow streets were already bustling, couriers on bikes, construction crews yelling over the grind of machinery, and honking cars battling for position along Mass Avenue. But one sound cut through the noise with a quiet hum that barely turned heads, the whisper of an electric motorcycle gliding along the asphalt. Marcus Jordan, MJ to everyone who mattered, pulled to a smooth stop at the corner of Tremont and West. He tapped the screen on his ride-hailing app, checked the next pickup, and adjusted his mirrored visor. Another morning on the road. MJ rode a bike like it was part of him. Custom-built, matte black with cobalt blue trim and silent torque that could eat up the road without making a scene. He had no decals, no flashy gear. Just a lightweight black jacket, sturdy gloves, and a calm that seemed to surround him like a second helmet. People knew MJ. They didn't know his story, not the whole one, but they knew him by how he rode, how he spoke, how he always seemed to show up when someone needed to get across town in a hurry, or escape the day in silence. There were rumors, of course. The kind that bloomed in barber shops and back alleys. Some said he used to be a fighter. Others swore he was a preacher who lost his faith but found peace on two wheels. MJ never confirmed or denied. He just gave rides. His first pickup of the day was a nurse named Gloria who worked the overnight shift at a downtown hospital. She was barely keeping her eyes open when he rolled up outside the ER bay. "Emmy, you're a blessing," she sighed, climbing onto the back seat with practiced ease. He smiled, checking the side mirrors. "Rough night? 3 traumas, no coffee, and a broken vending machine. I almost hugged your bike when I saw it." He chuckled softly, guiding them into the steady flow of traffic. "I'd recommend the hug after breakfast. Less chance of it hugging back." She laughed, the kind of tired laugh that came from deep in the bones. For the next 20 minutes, MJ navigated the back roads and shortcuts only a seasoned local, or someone with an uncanny instinct, could find. He avoided the backed-up highways, glided through alleys most folks wouldn't enter, and turned streets that usually took half an hour into a 10-minute trip. When he dropped her off near Mission Hill, she paused before stepping off. "You ever think about doing more with that voice of yours?" she asked. MJ tilted his head. "Like what?" "Radio, audiobooks, meditation apps, something. You sound like peace on a plate." He grinned. "I'm just a driver." But she didn't buy it, not completely. No one ever really did. MJ's day continued like that. Students headed to campus, an older man going to physical therapy, a poet in need of silence, and a long ride along the Charles River. Each one thanked him. Some tipped, some didn't. It didn't matter. MJ wasn't doing this for the money. The road had always called to him, and this was his way of answering without the weight of uniforms or orders. By early afternoon, he found himself in the North End, parked at his usual corner cafe. The staff knew him well: double espresso, a square of biscotti, and a stool at the back with a view of the harbor. He watched the water in silence, his eyes following the distant arc of a ferry boat. Somewhere inside him, the rhythm of memory stirred. He had walked beside oceans before. Not like this one. The oceans he remembered were edged with sandbags, guarded by men with rifles, and littered with stories no one wrote down. He pushed the thoughts away, took another sip of espresso, and focused on the now. The smell of roasted beans. The clink of cutlery. The laughter of tourists. MJ's phone buzzed. A new ride request. He glanced at the pickup location. The Ritz-Carlton. VIP status. Triple rate. A gold-circled badge appeared next to the name. MJ's brow furrowed slightly. He didn't get many VIPs. Most of those folks preferred private cars, limos, or luxury sedans. Motorbike taxis weren't their usual style. But he accepted the ride. As he mounted the bike, he glanced once more toward the harbor. The sky was beginning to shift, clouds rolling in from the east, dulling the sunlight. He zipped up his jacket, locked his helmet, and pulled into traffic with the smooth precision of someone who knew how to move through a city without being noticed. 15 minutes later, he arrived at the hotel. Polished glass and marble columns stretched high above him. Outside the revolving doors, a small group waited, security detail in matching earpieces, 2 aides in sharp suits, and a man MJ instantly recognized, though they had never met in person. Tall, thin, with silver hair combed back like silk, and a face lined with years of diplomacy. Ambassador Nikolai Petrov. MJ stopped the bike, turned off the motor, lifted his visor. Petrov locked eyes with him. Froze. The aides said something to him, but he didn't hear them. Slowly, Petrov stepped forward. His face a mixture of disbelief and something deeper. Reverence. He reached out, clasping MJ's hand tightly with both of his own. "You're Commander Jordan?" he said, voice almost a whisper. MJ held his gaze, unmoving. "Just MJ these days," he replied. Behind them, the street noise faded as if the city itself paused to listen. Petrov bowed his head, still holding MJ's hand. "I never thought I would see you again." MJ nodded once, gently pulling his hand back. "Let's get you where you're going." He handed the diplomat a helmet as if this were just another ride. But both men knew the truth. The road was about to turn. The ambassador eased onto the back of the motorcycle with more grace than expected for a man in his 60s. His aides looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with their phones and exchanging uncertain glances. But Petrov ignored them. He accepted the helmet, snapped the strap under his chin, and sat upright behind MJ as though he had done this before. MJ adjusted the rearview mirrors, caught a glimpse of the man's eyes through the visor reflection, and felt a quiet shift in the air. This ride would not be like the others. They eased into traffic, MJ guiding them down Stewart Street and onto the winding veins of Boston's downtown. He took a deliberately meandering route, not to delay but to provide space for what was coming. The streetlights flicked past them, sun cutting between buildings in long golden bars. For a while they said nothing. Only the wind spoke, slipping between the layers of their silence. "You saved my life," Petrov said, his voice muffled through the helmet but clear enough to carry over the hum of the bike. MJ didn't respond. "It was the winter of 2006, Petrov went on. "I was stationed near Mitrovica. We were delivering medical supplies when the convoy was ambushed. You were with the United Peace Response Corps then. You came in alone, no backup, no weapons drawn. Just a radio, a translator, and a backpack full of insulin." MJ turned onto a side street near South Station, avoiding a traffic jam he had anticipated before the first horn even sounded. "You walked through gunfire," Petrov said, voice rising, emotion surfacing like a tremor. "You spoke to both sides. Warlords, thieves, men who had never bent to any flag. And somehow they listened. You got them to lower their weapons. You gave them something to believe in even for just one day." "I did what I could," MJ finally said. "No, Commander. You did what no one else could. And then you vanished." MJ pulled onto a quieter road, where the trees hung low and the traffic thinned. Beacon Hill's brownstones rose around them like memories in brick. "I didn't vanish," MJ said softly. "I just stopped chasing what broke me." There was silence again, but heavier this time. Petrov sat back slightly, collecting himself. "I owe you my life. But more than that, I owe you my peace. You didn't just save me. You reminded me that diplomacy only matters if someone is willing to walk into danger unarmed and still hold their ground." The motorcycle turned onto Mount Vernon Street. MJ slowed near the edge of Boston Common, pulling into a narrow service lane beneath a grove of trees. He stopped the bike and let the silence settle around them. He turned off the motor, removed his helmet, and looked back at the ambassador. "Why are you really here, Petrov?" The older man hesitated. Then he removed his own helmet, revealing eyes that looked older than they had minutes ago. "There's a man in Boston," he said. "Not just any man. A former arms broker. Private military contractor. You might remember him. Anton Resnick." MJ didn't blink, but the name curled through his chest like smoke. "He was part of the group you disbanded in Sudan. After that, he disappeared underground. Now, intelligence suggests he's in this city. And he's watching my delegation." MJ rested his hands on the handlebars. "You want me to track him? I want you to help us prevent what could be a catastrophic event." Petrov said. I want your judgment, your instincts, your presence. MJ shook his head slightly. I'm not part of that world anymore. You never stopped being who you are, Petrov said. You just stopped letting people see it. MJ stood, walking a few paces away. The trees around them swayed gently, sunlight glinting through green leaves. He looked down at his reflection in the chrome of a fire hydrant. A rider. A shadow. A man who used to lead in silence, who once spoke louder with peace than any army could with guns. I don't carry weapons anymore, he said. I'm not asking you to, Petrov replied. I'm asking you to carry a message. That the kind of man you are still exists in this world. Behind them, the sound of an approaching car interrupted the moment. Black sedan. Government plates. Petrov glanced back. That's my team. I was supposed to ride with them. You still can, MJ said. But Petrov only smiled. No. I needed this ride. I needed to see for myself. He extended a hand. MJ took it. If you change your mind, Petrov said, the embassy knows how to reach me. And if not, thank you. For then. For now. The sedan pulled up. Petrov handed MJ the helmet, nodded once, and stepped into the waiting car without another word. MJ stood alone as the car disappeared around the bend. He mounted the bike again, slipped on his helmet, and rode slowly back toward the main road. The city hadn't changed. The world hadn't stopped. But something inside him had shifted. He didn't want to go back to the man he was. But maybe, just maybe, there was still something left of him the world could use. By the time MJ reached his small apartment in Dorchester, the sun had already begun its slow descent, casting long shadows between buildings and turning the streets a deep amber. He pulled the motorcycle into the alley behind his building and parked beside a worn wooden fence covered in ivy. His place was modest, a converted upper flat in a triple-decker, just far enough from the busier neighborhoods to give him peace, but still close enough to the people he liked to watch over. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Clean, simple, and full of deliberate choices. A bookshelf lined with old travel memoirs and historical accounts. A single photograph on the wall of a younger MJ in uniform, standing with a group of children outside a battered refugee clinic. The frame had a crack in the corner. He never replaced it. He peeled off his jacket, hung it by the door, and went straight to the small window by the kitchen. From there, he had a clear line of sight to the street below, a habit left over from another life. He watched a couple argue near a mailbox, a delivery driver unload boxes across the street, and a kid tossing a basketball alone in the alley. Normal life. Unremarkable. And yet, MJ knew how quickly normal could flip. He moved to the table, opened a weathered notebook, and flipped through pages of carefully kept notes. Schedules, routes, names of regular riders, details others would overlook. There was no mention of Ambassador Petrov, not yet. But the name Anton Resnick, that one was already in the book. Scribbled, crossed out, scribbled again. Resnick wasn't a name you heard by accident. And he wasn't the kind of man who showed up in a city like Boston without a reason. MJ poured himself a glass of water and sat in silence. He didn't want to return to that world. He'd worked hard to bury it under layers of kindness, reliability, and distance. But the world had a way of reaching through the walls you built when it wanted something. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it ring out. A minute later, a text came through. We need to talk. C. Shaw. He stared at the name. C. Shaw. It had been years. Colleen Shaw was once his second in command. An intelligence analyst and field operative who could read people like books and plans like maps. She was sharp, loyal, and one of the few who had stood by him during the last mission, the one that broke him. MJ tapped the message, paused, then typed a reply. Where? The answer came seconds later. Pier 42. 1 hour. Come alone. MJ didn't hesitate. He moved with the same quiet precision he'd always carried, checking his jacket, reloading a burner phone with an encrypted app, and tucking his old field watch into his pocket. Not for the time, but for the feel of it. Familiar weight. A reminder of who he'd been, and the lines he'd never cross again. As he rode through the city toward the docks, the wind picked up, pulling the city's smells into one swirling mix. Sea salt, exhaust, fried food, and spring pollen. Boston was awake now, pulsing as if it too sensed something stirring beneath its surface. Pier 42 was quiet when he arrived. The kind of place used for loading seafood at odd hours, mostly abandoned after dark. MJ parked the bike and waited, helmet still on, until he saw the shape of a woman walking toward him from the far end of the dock. Colleen Shaw hadn't changed much. Her hair was shorter and her jacket was civilian, but her eyes still scanned every corner like she was ready for a sniper to pop up. She stopped a few feet away, arms crossed. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. MJ lifted his visor. "You called?" She nodded, letting out a breath. "It's good to see you." "You too. What's going on?" She hesitated. "Resnick's here. I saw him myself. He's not hiding." "Why now?" MJ asked. "Why Boston?" "We think it's the conference," she said. "Not Petrov, not directly. Resnick doesn't work in politics. He works in chaos, disruption. He thrives when lines are redrawn. There's a rumor going around that he's planning something to fracture the security alliances that came out of the Balkan Accords." MJ looked out over the water, the lights of East Boston flickering across the bay. "You're asking me to do what?" he said. "We don't need a soldier," Shaw said. "We need someone who knows how to disappear into the city, listen, pick up the threads, and pull quietly." "And if I say no?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Then I hope someone else gets to him before he gets to the intern." MJ turned sharply. "What intern?" "Name's Emilio Rojas. Works for the Spanish delegate. Young, smart, naive. He disappeared 2 days ago. No one's reporting it yet, but there's chatter on dark channels that he might have seen something. Or been approached." MJ felt something shift in his chest. Not fear. Not anger. The same thing he used to feel when civilians got caught in something they never saw coming. A pulse of obligation. "Send me what you have," he said quietly. Shaw didn't smile. She just nodded. "You sure?" "No," he said. "But I'm going anyway." As she turned to leave, she said one more thing. "We never stopped needing people like you, MJ. You just stopped letting us ask." He watched her disappear into the dark. Then he stood there, alone on the pier, wind in his jacket, city humming behind him. And just like that, the road he thought he'd left behind started pulling him back. The next morning, Boston moved like it always did, stubborn, loud, alive. MJ rolled through it early, the sunrise turning the Charles River silver. Commuters filled the sidewalks with coffee in one hand and stress in the other. But beneath the hum of city life, MJ heard something else. He always had. His ear was trained for rhythm, the kind that told you when something was off. A silence where there should be chatter. A glance that lingered a beat too long. Boston, for all its noise, had patterns. And MJ knew when one of them slipped. He took only 2 riders that morning. Both regulars. A nurse from Mission Hill who always tipped in exact change. A retired engineer on his way to a chess club in Cambridge. Easy rides. Familiar. He used the in-between time to watch. To listen. The South End. Chinatown. The financial district. He cruised the alley behind the Spanish consulate, eyes tracing every doorway, every parked van, every idle cigarette burned too long. Watching without being watched. He didn't talk to anyone. Not yet. By noon, a file pinged through on his burner phone. Shaw had delivered. MJ scrolled through the brief on Emilio Rojas. 24. Grad student. Political science. Born in Valencia. Fluent in 4 languages. Smart enough to stand out. Young enough to underestimate danger. The last known footage showed Emilio leaving the embassy alone on a rainy Tuesday night. He cut across Columbus Avenue and vanished near a construction site 2 blocks away. No signs of forced entry back at his apartment. No ransom call. Just gone. MJ pocketed the phone, mounted his bike, and turned toward the neighborhood Emilio disappeared in. He knew better than to ask questions with a badge. That spooked people. But a man with a calm voice and honest eyes on a bike. People talked to him. At the construction site, MJ parked by a chain-link fence. A crew was working the far end, pouring concrete and shouting over generators. MJ approached the site manager, a wiry man with a sun-creased face and suspicious eyes. "You see anyone come through here late Tuesday night?" MJ asked, polite, calm. The man shrugged. "We get kids sneaking in all the time. Looking for shelter or a place to tag a wall. College kid. Spanish. Walked with purpose." The man paused. "Come to think of it, yeah. Rainy night. Had a messenger bag. Looked like he didn't belong. He was arguing with someone. Tall guy. Maybe Eastern European. Sounded like trouble, but I didn't call it in." MJ kept his face neutral. "You hear what they said?" "Just yelling." The older one got in his face. The kid tried to walk off and the guy grabbed his arm. But then a car pulled up. Big black SUV. Tinted. They both went quiet. Then they got in and left. MJ's stomach tightened. "You get a plate?" The man laughed without humor. "Not that good, friend." MJ nodded. "Thanks." He slipped the man a folded 20, not for the information but for the silence that would follow. Back on the bike, MJ didn't head straight to the embassy. He veered west, taking a curved route through the old warehouse district. He needed air, space to think. Resnick didn't leave messes. He didn't argue in alleys or throw punches in the rain. If he was in that SUV, something had gone sideways. MJ replayed the site manager's words. The body language. The sudden silence when the SUV pulled up. Emilio had been grabbed, but not by force. He had walked into that vehicle. Not willingly maybe, but not kicking and screaming either. That meant leverage. Or a promise. At a red light on Tremont, MJ reached for his phone and opened the secure chat app Shaw had embedded in the file drop. MJ, I have a sighting. Emilio entered a black SUV with an unknown man, possibly Resnick or one of his contacts. No struggle. South End. Construction site. Shaw, we're seeing movement. Unusual foot traffic around the waterfront. Resnick's people don't operate solo. If they're gathering, they're preparing. MJ, find out if Petrov changed his security detail in the last 48 hours. Shaw, what? MJ, because I think they're already inside. He closed the app. Boston's waterfront was a mess of piers, condo developments, seafood warehouses, and boutique hotels trying to clean up the view. Too many entrances. Too many blind spots. If someone wanted to use the area as staging ground for an operation, it wouldn't be hard. MJ turned toward the docks again, this time on a different path, cutting across Roxbury and swinging wide through the seaport. He slowed near Pier 42, just in time to see a black SUV with diplomatic tags pulling away. He didn't chase. That was for amateurs. Instead, he doubled back to a lot across the street, shut down the engine, and waited. 15 minutes later, two men stepped out of a steel doorway halfway down the pier. Both wore dark coats and moved like people who didn't want to be noticed. But MJ noticed. One of them was tall, sharp-featured, with a familiar limp. Resnick. The other, slightly younger, broad shoulders, alert, was unfamiliar. They paused, speaking quietly before heading in opposite directions. MJ sat completely still, eyes narrowed. He didn't know what game Resnick was playing yet, but it was already moving. And somewhere, a young man named Emilio was part of it. MJ checked the time. If they were planning something around the conference, the clock was already ticking. He tapped the handlebars of his bike. Time to pick up speed. MJ waited until the two men were out of sight before leaving the shadows of the parking lot. He started the bike, kept the throttle soft, and circled the block twice before doubling back to the pier. He knew Resnick's patterns from years ago. He preferred to mislead by proximity, never going far, always watching the reaction. MJ had learned the hard way not to take anything at surface value when dealing with men like him. Resnick's appearance in Boston wasn't the show. It was the smoke. The real move was happening elsewhere, just out of sight. MJ wasn't just tracking him, he was reading the shape of his presence, the shadows it cast. Back near the steel door they'd emerged from, MJ dismounted and walked the length of the pier on foot. Old storage units lined the inner wall, most unused, some locked from the inside. One of them had a faint scuff near the base, recent by the look of it, and a small magnetic sensor near the doorframe. That meant surveillance. That meant someone had eyes. He didn't touch the door. Didn't need to. The markings on the ground told him enough. Two sets of boot prints, one larger than the other. Coming and going. No drag marks. No scuffle. Whoever was here, they moved in and out on their own. That meant Emilio might still be alive. MJ returned to his apartment later that evening, tension resting just beneath his skin. The walls felt closer than usual. He moved with practiced care, making tea, setting the kettle down quietly. He didn't turn on music or the television. He let the silence speak. The tea steeped, forgotten, as he opened a second drawer under his sink and pulled out a black pouch. Inside, neatly wrapped in cloth, were the tools of an old trade, nothing lethal, but each piece useful. Wireline camera. Directional mic, analog map of Boston's utility lines. A faded USB device. He pulled the last one free and held it in his hand. This wasn't for offensive work. It was a key. A codebreaker, years out of date but still good for systems not plugged into modern surveillance networks. Embassies, safe houses, private security firms that lived in the gaps between regulation and secrecy. MJ plugged it into an offline laptop, watched the screen light up with code, and waited. Within moments, a directory opened. Most of the files were old, stale, operations long past. But tucked in the corner was a folder marked with a symbol he hadn't seen in a decade. A red crescent. The old call sign Resnick used during covert Balkan campaigns. Inside, a single file. Audio. No metadata. He played it. The recording was grainy, translated from Russian. Once the boy is processed, we extract the route files and send them east. If Petrov makes a move, he'll expose himself before the vote. Jordan is irrelevant." There was a pause. "Unless he gets involved." Another voice answered. "Come, American." "He won't. He's still pretending he's retired." MJ's jaw tensed. It was Shaw's voice. He paused the file. Not disbelief, MJ had moved past that long ago, but disappointment. He had trusted her, even after all this time. Maybe that had been the trap. He rewound the recording and played it again, listening closely to the background. There was a faint hum, machine cooling systems, maybe industrial. Then a single ping, high, soft, repeating. Elevator code. A freight lift specifically. MJ had once operated in a Baltic port where those same tones marked floor levels for large-scale cargo. He knew the building. It was in East Boston, and it was still active. MJ closed the laptop and slid the USB into his pocket. If Emilio was still alive, that location was his best chance. But it had to be soon. If Resnick's men were extracting route files, they were likely using him for access codes tied to embassy movement. That kind of data would compromise every attending diplomat if it reached the wrong hands. He made one stop before heading out. A garage in Matapan run by an old friend from back in his peacekeeping days, Amadou Diallo. Tall, strong voice like gravel, hands stained from engine grease. Amadou looked up as MJ walked in. "I was wondering when you'd come. You still have the signal jammer?" Amadou nodded, disappeared into the back, and returned with a lead-lined case. "Old school. Works for about 90 feet. Block cell and GPS for 30 seconds before burning out." MJ nodded. "That's all I need." As MJ turned to leave, Amadou said quietly, "You going to war?" "No," MJ said, "just clearing a path." By midnight he was in East Boston, parked 3 blocks from the warehouse. He left the bike behind, opting for silence over speed. The building loomed ahead, gray, cracked, forgotten by time. Its only light came from the upper floors, glowing dim through dirty windows. He moved around back, finding the service entrance just like he remembered. The keypad was old. He didn't need to hack it. He knew the manual override sequence from his days on the ground. The freight lift was running. Humming. He waited. 2 floors up, a shadow passed in front of the window. MJ stepped inside, silent as breath. He was done waiting for something to go wrong. He was ready to find the boy. And he wasn't alone anymore. Because the road, his road, was speaking again. MJ moved through the warehouse like a memory returning to form. His breath low. His weight controlled. Every step mapped in his mind before his foot touched ground. The layout was old, but the bones of the building hadn't changed. Freight elevators still clanged on a delay. The floorboards on the south hallway still creaked when stepped on wrong. There were always corners you didn't turn until you had to. The upper floors were dim, filled with unused equipment and crates stacked like forgotten intentions. MJ paused near a junction where the hallway split, removed the signal jammer from his coat, and pressed the activation switch. A soft pulse clicked from the device and he counted to 10. Cameras dead. Comms fried. For half a minute they were flying blind. He moved fast, reaching a steel door half-cracked open at the end of the hall. Voices inside. One calm. One struggling. "Tell us the access point again." "I already did," said Emilio's voice, shaky, not panicked. "It's time-locked. You'll need someone on the inside to open it." "We already have someone on the inside," came the cold reply. MJ recognized the accent. Eastern Albanian, twisted under years of Western schooling. Resnick's voice, but edged with impatience. MJ took one deep breath and slid a mirror under the door's edge. 3 men. Emilio tied to a chair. No marks on him. Still healthy. One guard near the window watching for movement outside. Another standing by a desk with a tablet in his hand. Resnick at the far end, near a wall map dotted with markers. MJ whispered into a lapel mic. Dead line. The jammer had burned itself out. No calling Shaw now even if he wanted to. He checked his pocket for the second piece of gear. An old cold gas flashbang. Silent. Emits a blinding strobe and high-pitched disorientation tone. Non-lethal. Military grade, long discontinued. He palmed it, rolled it through the crack in the door, and turned away just before it detonated. The light burst like lightning. MJ moved in as the shrill frequency rang out. He dropped the first man with a single armbar takedown and pinned the second against the desk with his shoulder. The guard reached for a weapon, but MJ twisted his wrist sharply, just enough to disarm, not to break. He shoved the man toward the door and looked straight at Resnick. The room cleared. Resnick, unfazed, straightened his jacket and raised his hands. "Commander Jordan," he said with a smirk. "It's been years." "Don't call me that." Resnick glanced at Emilio, then back to MJ. "You've aged well. Civilian life suits you." MJ said nothing, untying Emilio in seconds. The young man blinked rapidly, stunned but uninjured. "Can you walk?" "Yeah," Emilio stammered. "I think so." "Then go. Down the back stairwell, 3 flights. Don't stop." Emilio hesitated, then nodded and bolted. Resnick didn't move. "You won't stop this," he said calmly. "Even if you get the kid out, the plan's already underway." MJ looked at him. "There's no plan without access." Resnick's eyes gleamed. "You think this is about files?" He stepped forward. "This is about erasure. Petrov dies, the vote collapses. The Balkans fragment again. We don't need codes. We just need chaos." MJ narrowed his gaze. "You never learned. War doesn't change people. It just reveals what was already broken." Resnick laughed. "Then consider me honest." He reached slowly into his coat, pulling free a small switch. MJ tensed. Resnick's thumb hovered over it. "Failsafe. Push this and the explosive in Petrov's security detail activates. Small charge. Just enough to make a statement. You're bluffing." Resnick's smile faded. "Try me." Then the door burst open again. A figure in tactical black swept in and tackled Resnick to the ground. It was Shaw. She moved fast, pinning Resnick with a precision that didn't match her age or rank. "Backups in position," she said to MJ without looking. "Secure the device." He was telling the truth. MJ grabbed the trigger from Resnick's hand and placed it in a signal cage. Safe. Disarmed. He looked at Shaw. "You were working both ends." "I had to," she said. "He never would have shown himself if he thought we were still allies." "You used me," MJ said quietly. "I needed someone he feared." They stood in silence as agents poured into the building, cuffing Resnick and clearing the room. Emilio was already outside, being led to a waiting car. Sirens were distant, low, and without urgency. This kind of sweep didn't make headlines. Shaw stepped closer. "You saved him," she said. "And probably a dozen others by morning." MJ gave a slow nod. Then he turned and walked away. No handshake. No debrief. He took the stairs down into the night and disappeared into the streets of East Boston. Back to his bike, back to the shadows that still knew his name. Back to the road. The city had a different hum the morning after. Not quieter, not louder, just more deliberate, as if Boston itself had caught its breath. MJ rode through the streets with the sun just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the cobblestones and red brick buildings. His bike purred beneath him, its electric hum slipping between the sounds of waking traffic and distant harbor gulls. He wasn't heading anywhere in particular. Just moving. The kind of ride you take not to arrive, but to let the road tell you when it's time to stop. News of a foiled diplomatic breach trickled quietly through certain circles, never hitting the headlines. There would be no public trial, no names. Ambassador Petrov remained safe, his presence in the city preserved as a simple visit. The delegation would vote as planned. A fragile ceasefire overseas would hold for now. Behind the scenes, analysts would spend months trying to trace how the breach had failed. They would never name Marcus Jordan. And that's exactly how he wanted it. Later that day, MJ stopped by Amadou's garage, dropped off the equipment and stayed for coffee. They didn't talk much. Just sat in the back on folding chairs, listening to the neighborhood move around them. Was it worth it? Amadou asked after a long silence. MJ stirred his cup. The boy's alive. Petrov's safe. Boston keeps breathing. That's enough. You ever think about going back? To what? To being more than a man on a bike. MJ gave a small smile. This is enough. By afternoon he was back online, logged into the app, taking ride requests like nothing had happened. The helmet went on, the throttle eased open, and the routine resumed. His second passenger of the day was a music teacher from Roxbury, headed to South Station. She wore a faded Red Sox hoodie and spoke softly, distracted by sheet music in her hands. As she climbed off the bike at the curb, she turned and gave MJ a smile. "You've got the smoothest ride in Boston." MJ dipped his head. "Just glad to get you where you need to go." She paused, looking at him for a moment longer than usual. "You look like someone who's been around the world," she said. "Seen some things." "Maybe," MJ said. "But I like it better here." She laughed gently and waved goodbye. He watched her go, then turned the corner onto Summer Street, easing into the rhythm of the road again. No medals. No monuments. No names written down. Just MJ. That evening, as dusk painted the city in gold and violet, MJ pulled up outside the Ritz-Carlton one last time. Petrov stood near the entrance, alone, dressed for departure, a simple bag at his feet. When he saw MJ, he smiled, eyes warm with something deeper than gratitude. "I won't say thank you," he said, "because we both know what you did." MJ nodded. "Travel safe." Petrov stepped forward, clasped MJ's hand once more. "There are still people out there who remember you." "I'm not hiding," MJ said. "I'm just done chasing things that don't need chasing." Petrov's eyes narrowed with respect. "You've earned your peace." MJ climbed back onto the bike, visor down, engine soft. "I'll keep riding," he said. "It's what I do." Petrov stepped back. "Then may the road stay clear for you, my friend." And with that, MJ pulled into the evening, merging with the pulse of the city. No destination, no mission, just one more ride, and then another. Because some men don't need to be seen to make a difference. Some roads are ridden not to escape the past, but to carry it gently, quietly, into the future. And Marcus Jordan rode his road well. Not as a soldier, not as a legend, just as MJ. The end. Here are 7 moral lessons that can be drawn from this story. 1. Strength doesn't always make noise. MJ's strength never comes from aggression or dominance. Throughout the story, we see that he is deeply capable, militarily trained, strategically gifted, but he moves with quiet confidence. His power lies in restraint, timing, and clarity. In a world that often glorifies loud leadership and forceful action, MJ teaches that real strength doesn't demand attention. It earns respect silently, often by simply showing up, staying calm, and doing the right thing when no one else will. He diffuses conflict not with weapons but with awareness, empathy, and knowledge of how people work. His strength is not in being feared but in being trusted. That's the kind of strength that lasts. 2. You are not your past, but you should honor it. MJ's past as a commander is something he neither brags about nor denies. It shaped him, taught him hard lessons, and gave him the tools to act decisively when the time comes. But he doesn't live in it. He has chosen a life of humility, away from medals and missions. At the same time, he doesn't run from who he was. When danger resurfaces, he steps up, not to relive the past but to protect the present. This teaches that our pasts don't define us, but they do inform us. And when necessary, honoring that past by using its lessons to serve others is one of the purest ways to grow. 3. Redemption isn't loud. It's lived. Redemption doesn't always come with applause or recognition. MJ never asks to be forgiven or admired for what he's done before. He doesn't wear guilt like a badge, but it lingers quietly in his choices. The redemption arc here is subtle, shown in the way he protects the young intern, the way he prevents violence, and the way he insists on a solution without bloodshed. Redemption for him is not about wiping the slate clean. It's about showing up every day and doing better. Not with fanfare but with focus. In a world quick to judge or label, MJ shows that redemption is earned not by apologies, but by consistent, ethical action. 4. Service takes many forms. The most striking element of MJ's life is his commitment to service. Long after his days as a soldier have ended, he serves the people of Boston as a motorcycle taxi driver. He listens. He guides. He protects in small ways every day, even if the world doesn't notice. Service, the story shows us, isn't confined to uniforms or titles. It's found in how we treat strangers, how we keep our word, how we lend our strengths when others need them. MJ doesn't stop serving just because his role has changed. He adapts, finds a new lane, and continues his purpose in a way that fits the life he wants to lead. 5. Identity is a choice, not a label. People try to define MJ, Commander Jordan, war hero, legend, but he insists on being seen simply as MJ. He has chosen who he wants to be, regardless of the roles others have tried to place on him. This moral speaks directly to the tension many people feel between how they are perceived and who they truly are. MJ's story reminds us that identity is personal. It's shaped by experience but owned by the individual. You can carry your past, acknowledge your history, and still draw the line about who you are now. And sometimes, the most radical thing you can do is live your truth quietly and unapologetically. 6. Peace is worth protecting, even quietly. MJ has lived through war. He's seen destruction and chaos, and he has emerged with a deep respect for peace, not just political peace but personal peace. He doesn't seek vengeance or glory. He doesn't take up a weapon even when he's threatened. His entire mission is to stop violence before it starts. His courage lies in prevention, not reaction. And through this, the story offers a vital lesson. Peace is not passive. It takes work. It takes watchfulness. It takes people willing to act before things fall apart. MJ is one of those people, and his commitment to preserving peace, through intelligence and timing rather than force, is what makes his story so powerful. 7. Ordinary lives can hold extraordinary purpose. Perhaps the most inspiring moral of all is that a man riding a bike through Boston, giving people rides, can still change the course of a global crisis. MJ has chosen a life that looks simple from the outside, but within that life, he carries extraordinary purpose. His kindness ripples outward. His choices shape outcomes no one else can see. The story challenges us to rethink what impact really looks like. You don't need a grand stage to make a difference. You can be someone who quietly makes the world safer, kinder, more stable. One ride, one gesture, one decision at a time. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. The purpose of this narrative is to provide moral lessons, motivation, inspiration, and meaningful learning for viewers. It is not intended as factual or biographical content. Thank you so much for watching and listening to The Road He Rides. I hope Marcus Jordan's journey inspired you and reminded you that strength, service, and quiet courage come in many forms. If this story touched you, please consider exploring more videos on this channel. There are many more tales and lessons waiting to be discovered, stories that uplift, motivate, and inspire. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with anyone who might need a little encouragement today. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know which part of the story resonated with you the most. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and keep riding your own road with purpose.